Today I'm going to show you how to make a marinated tofu fillet, which we're going to serve with coconut polenta, a peperonata and a tahini cream. So to begin with, and like all good dishes, we start with a block of tofu. So this is not just any tofu, this is an extra firm tofu which I've actually frozen overnight. Now I'm very much about my freezing and squeezing of tofu. I think it's a very important step to make a nice chewy tofu. So this has been frozen overnight. So as you can see, when I press into it, you can see all the water coming out here. So this is kind of creating a kind of a porous effect or a sponge effect in the tofu, which is going to absorb our marinade. So I'm going to turn it around a few times and I'm going to continue to squeeze it. And you can see there's quite a bit of water coming out of this. So this tofu now is about 400 grams and it's going to yield us about 4 fillets, about 100 grams per fillet. So I've worked my way around 3 or 4 times now and I can see already that we have a nice porous tofu. Now I've got to be careful at this stage because it is easy enough to break. So I'm going to take my tofu and carefully now I'm going to cut it into 4 even fillets. So for this shaped tofu, I'll cut first of all down the centre to make 2 large slabs. We'll cut them out and then we're going to make 2 more. And now with my fillets, I'm going to give them one final squeeze. And again, they're quite delicate at this point. So just one final squeeze, one final turn of each one, just to get as much liquid out as possible. Okay? Now we can discard this liquid here. Okay, so we're going to make our marinade now. So for our marinade, I have some miso here. Now I'm using shiro miso or white miso. I'm going to add to that some tamari. Now again, if you're making a non-gluten-free version, you could use soy sauce. I've got some toasted sesame oil here. I've got a little bit of mirin. Mirin adds a little bit of sweetness. It's a Japanese rice wine. And I have some rice vinegar. Just those 4 ingredients, a nice simple marinade. Now I've used a little bit of sesame oil, but it's not too much oil, because I find often in the marinades, if you use too much oil in the marinade, it doesn't penetrate so far into the tofu. So we're going to give that a little whisk there, like so. Get it nice and smooth, as smooth as possible. So I'm just going to pop this into, I have this clip save Tupperware container here. So I'm just going to pop that in, like so. And now with my tofu, I've got one more small thing to do. I'm going to make some small incisions in the tofu. I'm just kind of working my way along. I don't want to go too deep into it, otherwise I'll break it. Just a little bit into the tofu, like so. So I've actually only gone about halfway through the tofu. So I put one in, I give it a bit of a turn it around again, just to make sure that it's evenly coated. And there we are, beautiful. So it's perfect, right? So we're going to put the clip save on, the lid on here, clip it closed. Oh, but it should be okay. Just turn upside down, turn around a couple of times, just so we can get the marinade into the tofu as effectively as possible. And that's it. So with this now, I'm just going to pop this in the fridge. Just going to let it sit in the fridge now for about 2-3 hours before we cook it off. And moving on to the next part of the dish now, we're going to prepare our tofu. So I've got a pot here. I'll pop on the hob here. And let's see. I have a little bit of ginger, a little bit of garlic, which I've pureed. Not too much, just like a teaspoon of each. Just going to give them a stir. Now you can hear them starting to sizzle. Now you don't want to cook them too long. It's just a little bit of heat. Over a medium heat, and I'm going to start adding the stock. This is just a regular vegetable stock. Now you can make your own stock, of course, or else you can just use a shop broth variety. I was a bit lazy today, so I'm using a shop broth variety here, which is fine, you know, for this kind of thing. I'm going to ramp the heat up on that a little bit. Now we just want that to come up to a simmer. So I'm just going to pop the lid on here. Won't take too long. And when this comes to a simmer, we're going to add our polenta, we're going to add our coconut, and we're actually going to add a little bit of lime, okay? So while we're waiting that to come to a simmer, I'm going to prepare my lime. So I have a zester here. I'm just going to zest the lime. So we're going to use the zest and juice of maybe 1 lime here. That should be enough. I'll add the juice at the end. Now I don't add the lime juice or the zest at this point because we'll lose some of that lovely flavour. So that's our lime zested. And we'll juice it now in a moment. So I can see my stock is starting to come to the boil. I'll take my whisk. And when it comes to a rolling simmer, I'll add the polenta. If I add the polenta before it comes to a rolling simmer, it's going to cook a bit differently. It's going to start catching on me. It won't cook evenly. Clumps can develop. But if you rein the polenta in when it's at a simmer, you're going to get a nice smooth porridge, and that's really what you're looking for. So I can see now it's starting to come up. Lovely smell of stock here and ginger. And this will thicken almost immediately. And also, there's one thing to note about polenta. Polenta is like napalm, okay? So you've got to be very careful with it. I'm lowering the heat a little bit before I add it, because once it cooks, it spatters. And it spatters badly. I've got some very bad polenta burns over the years, so you've got to be very careful with this, okay? So you'll see now, it's still bubbling away here. It's starting to thicken. Just going to lower this down a little bit here. See, it's starting to spatter here. This is what I mean about the polenta being like napalm. So you can see now this is thickening up here. So to this now I'm going to add coconut next, okay? So I'm actually going to swap from the whisk and I'm going to add the coconut in. And we can just let that melt and stir. I'm going to stir it into the polenta, like so. Now you can use coconut milk in this recipe. If you're going to use coconut milk though, you have to adjust the stock quantities. So rather than using 600 mils of stock, you could use, let's say, 500 mils of stock and 1 tin of coconut milk, and you get the same effect. So I'm using 100 grams of creamed coconut here, which is about the same as 400 mils of coconut milk. Now the polenta I'm using here is a coarse polenta as opposed to a fine polenta. You'll find when you go to the store, there'll be different types of polenta or cornmeal available, and they all have slightly different properties. Like if you look at like a corn flour or a cornstarch, it's a very, very finely ground corn. Where if you look then at, let's say, cornmeal, it's not quite as ground. It's usually yellower in colour. And cornmeal is really nice for making breads. And then the next grade up then will be, I suppose, polenta, the kind of thicker, coarser cornmeal, which is what we're using here. And it really is just ground sweet corn, which is quite amazing. Dried and ground sweet corn. So I'm just going to stir this through. So I can see the coconut now is almost melted. And by the time the coconut is melted, the polenta will be nearly cooked. You can probably see the way it's starting to come away from the pan here. It's not sticking to the sides. It's got a nice smooth texture. That's kind of what we're looking for. So the last couple of ingredients to go in here now, we have our lime zest and our lime juice. So I'm going to add the zest in first. This is a bit messy here. I'll just take it up. I'll just drop it in. Well, like so. And then next we're going to put in our lime juice. So I'm just going to cut this. And I have my juicer here. Going to lower the heat here a little bit. And there we go. There's one lime. And two. So that's one lime juice, one lime zest, 100 grams of coconut, and our stock. And that's basically it. Now, there's no need for any salt in here. There's enough stock and there's enough salt in the stock, should I say. And that's basically our polenta. So I have here this little brownie tray. This is the perfect size actually for this amount of polenta. Just a regular brownie tray. I think it's a 20 by 30 centimetre. So what I've done now is I've lined it with some parchment paper. So it's parchment paper is like a step up from greaseproof paper. Please don't use greaseproof paper. It is rubbish. Use parchment paper, okay? And I just snip in the corners and it just folds in nicely, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pour this polenta in to a brownie tray. You can see. Level it out. And voila, that's really it. So what we do, all we do now is we just put this aside. So we have our tofu ready. We have our polenta ready. We're going to recook these later on. Or making the rest of the dish. So there we are. That's our polenta. Okay, so I'll put this aside to cool. Now I won't put that straight in the fridge. The reason I won't put that straight in the fridge is because it's very hot. So I want it to cool down first. So I want that to cool down to room temperature before it goes near the fridge. So I leave it out for an hour, let it cool down, then pop it in the fridge for another hour or two. And then it's good to go. Yeah, that's it. So polenta ready, tofu ready. We'll come back to the peperonata. So I have the tofu here, which has been marinating now for the last couple of hours. So you can see it's absorbed quite a lot of the marinade, which is what we're looking for. Our polenta now, the set firm. So they're ready to go. Before we do that now, before we prepare them and bake them, should I say, we're going to get our peperonata together, okay? Now our peperonata, this is based on an Italian style stew, which is usually made from just like, just peppers, tomatoes, vinegar, sometimes a little bit of sweetness, some capers, and it's often served cold as well as warm. Now the version we're making today, we're going to make with peppers, tomatoes, but we're going to add a little bit of an Asian hint to it. We're going to be using some sesame oil, a bit of vinegar, and we're going to be using some Chinese five spice in there as well. So I'm going to start with my peppers. So I have 4 peppers here. I've got 2 red, 2 yellow, which I'm just going to slice. So I want to de-seed them as well. So very quickly, just take out the seeds. It doesn't matter if a few seeds end up in your dish, it's fine. So when I'm de-seeding peppers, I tend to cut them into quarters and just take the seeds out. You can also just pull them out with your hands like this. This also works, whichever way you find handiest. So I usually just prepare them all first and then just cut them all at the same time, and we get them into some hot oil. For red and yellow peppers here, the oil is coming to a shimmer. Now it's important, you want the oil to come to a shimmer. You actually want to hear, well, I like to hear, personally, the vegetables landing in the oil. There's something nice about that sizzle. And when you hear that sizzle as well, it also indicates cooking. So it indicates that the peppers are hitting the oil, they're starting to brown, they're starting to cook, they're starting to break down a little bit. Just going to give it a little bit of a stir. Now it's on a high-ish heat at the moment. I just want to get the peppers coated in oil. Now there's about a tablespoon of oil in that pan, it's not too much. I'm just going to add a couple of ingredients here. So I have here some garlic, just some pureed garlic. Not too much now. I don't want the garlic to overpower it, so it's literally about 2 cloves. I have some Chinese five spice as well. That's just a mixture usually of cinnamon, star anise, clove, fennel and Szechuan peppercorns. Now we don't use too much of it because it's quite strong. We're only going to use a little bit. We've also got some bay leaves here, just 2 bay leaves. Again, not too many bay. It tastes like washing up liquid if you use too much bay leaf, and people don't really like the washing up flavour. And sugar. The sugar is going to help us all caramelise a little bit as well and add a little bit of richness and depth to the flavour. A little bit of sugar. Give that a stir. And now we have some tomato passata. So we're just going to add a passata in. This is really such a simple dish. And the beauty of this is that you can just let it do its own thing. So I can just leave that like that. Now I'm just going to give it a stir. Make sure it's all nicely combined. So I have that on a low to medium heat. Okay, there's a few more ingredients we'll add in later on. And now moving on to our polenta. Our coconut polenta, which is set here. You can see it's nice and firm. We're just going to upturn it onto the board, like so. And there we are. That's our polenta. So I'm going to trim off the edges. And then I'm going to cut this down the centre. Across the centre. So I've got 4 equal portions now, as you can see. They're all the same kind of size. Now each one of these portions, this is for one person. And then I'm going to cut these into wedges. So I'm just going to kind of cut across, make a diagonal across this piece here, and continue the line of the knife across this piece here. So I've got 4 diagonals. I'm going to make a diagonal here, and I'm going to make a diagonal here. So now I have 4 equal sized pieces of, or 8 equal sized pieces of polenta, should I say. Yeah, that's our polenta ready for the oven. So we're going to pop that into the oven now in a moment. But before we do that, we're going to also prepare our tofu. I'll just put this aside. So we have our polenta ready for the oven. This is going to go into the oven now for about, not for too long, for like maybe 15, 20 minutes, at about 180, 190. And what we want to do there, we just want to cook the polenta through and get a nice kind of sheen on the outside. It'll start to crisp. Now you don't want it too crispy. You just want to have a little bit of a crisp on it. We have our peperonata on here now, which is stewing away nicely. There's a lovely smell here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I have some peanut butter here. This is just smooth peanut butter. Now, with the peperonata, I'm going to lower the heat down again. I want a nice low heat, gentle bubbles coming up here. I'm going to just take this peanut butter. Now, I've used smooth peanut butter here. Now the peanut butter I'm using is it's actually one of the cheaper peanut butters. Just very, 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 very smooth, very, very pureed. So I'm just going to drop that there on top of the peperonata. I'm not going to stir it in. And the reason I'm not going to stir it in is because when I stir that in, that's going to create viscosity in the mixture, and it's going to mean the peppers are going to start sticking to the bottom. Rather, I'm going to let that peanut just sit there and melt slowly into the sauce. And then at the end, we give it a stir and we'll add in the last couple of ingredients. So let's pop that there like so. So here's our tofu. Now our tofu's been marinating for about 4 or 5 hours. So that's absorbing up. As you can see, it's absorbed most of the marinade. That's because the sponge effect we had earlier on when we had the tofu, we squeeze all the liquid out, and that liquid's now been replaced with the marinade. So the marinade's been drawn in for the most part. Now there's usually a little bit, it doesn't get drawn in, but we can just use that to base the tofu. So I'll just take these out. But 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's our tofu. So the last bit of marinade that's in the tray there, I'm just going to pour. Just pour over. Just a little bit, like so. Not too much. And then I've one more small thing I want to add to that. I have a little bit of oil, just a drop of oil. Not too much now. Just a drop of oil, because remember, we didn't use much oil in the tofu, so just want a little bit on top. This will just help us to crisp up, and it will also stop it burning on us in the oven. Now we're going to put these in the oven. The tofu is going to go on the shelf below the polenta. Now that's important, because you want the polenta to crisp up. You want the tofu to cook. Now, tofu is already a cooked ingredient because soybeans are cooked, but you want it just to get that little bit of extra time in the oven and make it a bit chewier as well. So we're going to take these guys now, we're going to put them both in the oven. Okay guys, so our polenta is in the oven, our tofu is in the oven, our peperonata is not far from being done. So we just have to prepare a few bits now really for garnish. So what I have here is I have some tahini. I'm going to make a tahini, whipped tahini cream. It's a thing, you know, you can see whipped tahini, but it's often a mixture of tahini and water whipped together. When you whip tahini and water together, it's nice. And to put lemon juice, garlic into it, it's quite nice, but it tastes too much like tahini, it's too strong. Well, for me anyway, I do love tahini, but I find the flavour can be quite overpowering. So I'm using less tahini here. And rather than water, I'm going to use a little bit of soy milk. The soy milk, it almost helps to emulsify. Little oil. It almost works a little bit like a mayonnaise. And I've got a little bit of onion powder here, not too much. And some lemon juice. Tiny pinch of salt. Don't overdo the salt, just for a bit of bite. So we're going to give it a whirl in the NutriBullet. Now again, you can use an immersion blender for this as well. The NutriBullet's very handy because you have to really give it a good blend. We're going to let this blend for about 30 seconds or so. Make sure it gets nice and creamy. Now let's have a look. Oh. How are we getting on? That's our tahini cream. You can see it's quite thick. It's kind of creamy. It has a lovely whipped consistency. So before we use this, it's nice to pop it in the fridge for a few minutes. Great, our tofu is ready. Our polenta is ready. Our tahini cream is ready. Our peperonata is just about ready as well. Just a couple of small tweaks we need to add in here. Now, as you can see, it's quite jammy now. The sauce is quite viscous. The peanuts melted into the sauce. The peppers are nice and soft. They're not exactly falling apart. We could leave it a little bit longer if we wanted, but this will do for now. So peppers in, tomato sauce nice and rich, and we're going to add a couple of other ingredients. So I have here some toasted sesame oil. Now toasted sesame oil is not really something I'd cook with. It's more I'd use as a condiment or I'd add it at the end. I'll also use it sometimes as part of a marinade as a backdrop to flavour, but I wouldn't use it as a sole cooking oil. I wouldn't really put it into starter cooking. It's quite delicate. It's got quite a nutty aroma, which works really well as a finishing oil in a dish. I'm dropping in a bit of vinegar here as well. Rice vinegar, which I do like. Rice vinegar, sesame oil, and that kind of completes our dish. Just need a pinch of salt. Again, not too much. We don't overpower it. I do like salt, but I don't like too much salt. There is a balance to be struck. Just going to stir that through. And that's our peperonata. Okay, we're going to serve up. We're going to use a kind of a light blue bowl here Now, I would favour using a white or a blue bowl for this kind of dish, just for the contrast. It just looks better. I wouldn't put it in a red bowl. So we're going to start with the peperonata, just a couple of spoons. There's enough here for 4 altogether, for 4 portions. So our peperonata's going in. And now, on top for peperonata, we have some of this tahini cream. So you can see it's kind of got a nice kind of a loose, creamy effect. We put this in the fridge for a few minutes and it's have to come out nice and thick. So we're just going to, a couple of dollops of that, not too much. Again, tahini can be quite overpowering. And we're going to take 2 of our polenta. This is the polenta we put in the oven earlier on. It's quite crispy. So I'm going to take 2 of these. And then we're going to top that with one of our tofu. We've got 4 of these tofu fillets. Just going to put a tofu fillet on top, like so. And there's our tofu. And then to finish off, a little garnish. We have some peanuts, just salted toasted peanuts, just a handful, just to add a bit of crunch. It's nice to have a bit of crunch in a dish. So I find when I'm cooking now, the 3 things I'm looking for are flavour, texture and visual appeal. So a little bit of colour here as well. There's some scallions. They'll add a bit of interest as well in terms of flavour. It's nice to have something raw with something cooked. And here we are. We have our peperonata, tomato, peanut, with our tahini cream, coconut polenta, marinated tofu, and then finishing with a garnish of peanuts and scallions.